When I saw the red S-Class stalled on the shoulder, I almost kept driving until I saw her. One look through the rain-streaked glass, and I knew that face. Jenna Cross, the woman I once loved, and the last person I ever expected to see waiting for help from me. Rain misted the two, lane road like breath on glass. Jenna Cross watched the dashboard lights of her Mercedes-Benz S-Class, 2020 model, fade before the engine coughed and died. She guided the crimson sedan, deep, elegant red, onto the shoulder, hazard stuttering. Inside, the quiet felt staged, as though the car respected her composure. Tailored blouse, neat hair twist. She tried the ignition again. Nothing. Outside, gravel drank the rain. Her heels slid. She lifted the hood and studied the geometry of belts and housings until the patter blurred the fields. A pickup slowed. A man stepped into her hazard lights. Faded jacket, damp hair, steady eyes. "Need a hand?" he asked. The voice struck a note she knew by heart. "Yes," she said, stepping aside. He leaned over the engine, efficient and calm. "Alternator," he murmured. Lucky it quit near his shoulder. She watched his hands more than the tools. Julian. The name surfaced at once. A college party, one photo, his arm across her shoulders, a laugh that made her feel seen. He didn't seem to know her now. His attention stayed on the work. "Pop the release again?" he asked. She did. In the pickup cab, a small face appeared. Loose curls, serious eyes, then returned to an open notebook. "My daughter, Emily," he said without looking up. "She rides with me when school's out." He tightened a bolt, wiped rain from his brow, and closed the hood. "Try it." The engine answered once. Relief rose, then paused. "Thank you," she said. "Please, let me pay." "No need," he said, gentle but firm. "There's a diner down the road. Decent pancakes. I'll be there after my shift." Emily waved. Jenna sat behind the wheel, palms cooling on leather. For a breath, the years collapsed. The boy who once made her feel possible was now a man who had rescued her evening without asking who she was. She didn't offer her name. She watched the mirror until his tail lights faded, then eased onto the road, the S-Class humming, a question louder than the rain. The neon sign of Pine Hill Diner hummed against the drizzle when Jenna pulled into the gravel lot. She told herself it was coincidence, that she simply needed coffee after the breakdown. Yet her reflection in the windshield betrayed intention. Lipstick refreshed, posture squared, the faint pulse of curiosity she could not name. Inside, warmth carried the smell of fried batter and old conversations. The counter held a single empty stool beside a woman folding menus. Jenna chose a booth instead, ordered black coffee, and tried not to scan the room. When the kitchen door swung open, she saw him, sleeves rolled, hands reddened from hot water, carrying a stack of plates. Julian, now a dishwasher in a place that still used jukeboxes. The sight pressed something tender in her chest, not pity, but dissonance. She had imagined him elsewhere, doing more, living larger. Yet here he was, moving with quiet steadiness that felt truer than ambition. Emily sat at the far end coloring on a placemat, tongue caught between her teeth. Every few minutes, she glanced toward the kitchen to catch her father's nod, the silent rhythm of trust. When Julian noticed Jenna, he hesitated, a second too long to be casual. Recognition flickered, brief as lightning. "Glad you made it," he said when he finally came over with her check, though she hadn't eaten. "Guess the S-Class runs fine now." "It does." She smiled. "But you were right about the diner. Coffee's decent. Best in town," he said, drying his hands on a towel. Not saying much. The line drew a laugh from her. Unpracticed, real. Emily approached shyly, holding a crayon drawing of a red car and a little stick figure man fixing it. "For you," she said, cheeks flushed. "Because you looked worried." Jenna folded the paper carefully. "It's perfect, sweetheart." "Thank you." As they left, Julian tipped his chin toward her in quiet acknowledgement. Outside, rain had stopped, leaving the world rinsed clean. She placed the drawing on the passenger's seat, smoothing its wrinkles, and for the first time in years, felt something alive move beneath the practiced calm of her life. The following week, Jenna found herself on that same stretch of highway again. Not by accident. She had told herself she needed a change of route after work, but her hands had steered without permission. The diner's neon sign appeared like an unspoken invitation, and when she parked, she realized she was smiling for no clear reason. Inside, The evening crowd was thin, truckers, two teenagers sharing fries, an older couple reading a crossword. Julian stood behind the counter, rinsing a row of mugs. He looked up, saw her, and his expression softened, not surprised but quietly pleased. "Back again?" he asked, drying his hands. "Best coffee in town," she said, returning his earlier words. He chuckled, shaking his head. "Flattery's the tip jar's job." Emily was at the corner booth, crayons scattered across the table, a chocolate milkshake melting beside her notebook. When she spotted Jenna, she waved enthusiastically. "Hi, Miss Carlady." Jenna laughed, sliding into the booth across from her. "Just Jenna, sweetheart. And that's quite the masterpiece you're working on." "It's a shop," Emily said proudly. "Dad's fixing it up. We're going to paint the signs soon." Her voice carried the certainty only children have, the kind that makes dreams sound like promises. Julian brought a fresh cup of coffee. "The shop's small," he said. "Old building my uncle left me. Needs more repairs than it's worth, but it's home." He hesitated, then added, "We fix things people think are done for." The words lingered. Jenna traced the rim of her cup. "That sounds like something worth saving." They talked until closing, about the diner's loyal regulars, about Emily's talent for math, about how life, if you let it, keeps pulling you back to unfinished places. When Jenna stood to leave, Julian walked her out. The night smelled of rain again, but softer this time. At her car, he said, "Funny how engines and people work the same. Ignore the small noises long enough, and they stall." She met his eyes, the faint reflection of the diner lights in both. "Then maybe it's time I listened." He smiled, the kind of smile that held understanding instead of expectation. As she drove off, the red Mercedes glided down the quiet road, and for the first time in years, Jenna didn't feel like she was escaping anywhere, only circling back to where something true had waited all along. A week later, rain returned like a familiar refrain. Jenna stopped by the diner again, but this time Julian wasn't there. Emily sat alone in their usual booth, a math workbook open beside an untouched slice of pie. The cook explained that Julian had gone to his shop to meet a supplier. Without thinking, Jenna offered to drive Emily there, and the girl accepted with the innocent ease that only comes from trust. The shop stood at the edge of town, a low brick building with faded letters barely spelling Ward's Auto Service. The parking lot smelled of oil and rain. Inside, the place was quiet except for the hum of a small radio and the ticking of a wall clock. Tools hung in tidy rows. A half-finished engine rested on the workbench like a patient mid-surgery. Julian looked up, surprise lighting his face. Didn't expect visitors. His voice carried that same calm steadiness that used to draw her in. Emily ran to him, talking fast about her homework and pie, and he smiled, the fatigue around his eyes softening. Jenna wandered through the space, tracing the edge of an old filing cabinet, and noticed a photograph pinned above the desk. Two young people leaning close, laughing. Her hand froze. It was them. College years, sunlight, his arm around her shoulder, her smile unguarded. She hadn't seen that picture in decades. "You kept it," she said quietly. Julian wiped his hands on a rag, then followed her gaze. "Yeah, found it in a box after Dad passed. Didn't think you'd even remember that day." "I do," she whispered. "You said the world was smaller when you fixed things instead of running from them." He smiled faintly. "That sounds like me back then. I just didn't live by it for a while." The air between them thickened with unspoken history. Choices made, roads taken. She wanted to tell him about her life. The career that looked successful but felt hollow, the house that echoed with silence. "Instead," she said, "you built all this yourself?" "With help," he replied. "Emily keeps me honest. She reminds me to finish what I start." The sound of rain against the metal roof grew steady, like a metronome keeping time with something inevitable. Jenna ran her fingers over the photo frame one last time. "You were always good at fixing things," she said softly. Julian's gaze met hers. "Not everything," he said, voice low, almost tender. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Emily's laughter from the corner broke the spell, light and unassuming. Jenna smiled, hiding the tremor in her breath. She realized then that some memories don't fade. They wait, patient and unhurried, until you find the courage to look back at them again. After that afternoon in the shop, Jenna began stopping by more often. Sometimes she brought sandwiches from the diner, sometimes coffee in paper cups, and sometimes nothing but company. She told herself it was to help Emily with homework, multiplication tables, spelling lists, little science projects. But even she stopped believing that excuse after the third visit. Julian never protested, though she noticed the trace of hesitation each time she appeared, as if he wanted to be sure her visits weren't born of pity. He worked deliberately, sleeves rolled, hands steady, the smell of oil and metal grounding the air. "You don't have to stay," he'd say, and she'd answer, "I know," without moving an inch. Emily adored her. The girl had a way of making even silence feel warm. She'd chatter while Jenna checked math problems, then show her sketches of cars with wings, engines glowing like suns. "Dad says every machine has a heart," she said once, tapping a drawing. "You just have to listen right." Jenna smiled. "He's right. Listening is the hardest part." What she didn't tell them was that her listening had turned inward. Her own life, the corporate meetings, the glass office, the cold applause, had begun to sound hollow. She couldn't shake the image of Julian's hands, capable and sure, shaping something real out of rust and wear. One evening, while he and Emily were inside working on a school model, she stepped out to take a call. Her financial advisor spoke briskly about investments and quarterly returns, but her eyes were fixed on the flickering light inside the shop. The two of them bent together over the workbench, laughing softly. That was when she made her quiet decision. Without telling him, Jenna arranged through a local contractor to replace the roof and wiring of the garage, framing it as a community grant for small repair businesses. She made sure no paperwork carried her name. It wasn't charity, at least, that's what she told herself. It was restitution for all the times she'd measured worth in titles instead of effort. A week later, Julian walked into the diner looking bewildered, rain dripping from his jacket. "They're redoing my roof," he said when he saw her. "Said some anonymous sponsor applied for the upgrade. I didn't ask questions, but why would anyone do that?" Jenna stirred her coffee. "Maybe someone noticed your shop deserves better." He studied her face, quiet but searching, and then gave a slow nod. "If I ever find out who it was, I'll thank them." She smiled faintly. "I think they'd appreciate that." That night, as she drove home, the rain glistened across the hood of the red S-Class. And for the first time in years, she felt something close to peace. Not the kind that comes from control, but the kind that grows from quietly doing the right thing without needing to be seen. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind of day that begins ordinary and ends like a storm you didn't see coming. Jenna was at her desk when the news alert appeared on her phone. Local auto shop receives anonymous grant from prominent investor. Below the headline was a photo of Julian standing by his newly repaired roof, smiling beside Emily. The name, Cross Foundation, gleamed in bold beneath it. She felt her stomach tighten. She hadn't expected publicity. The foundation handled dozens of community donations each year, and she assumed this one would vanish quietly into the pile. But this time, someone in her PR department must have decided the story was good for image. An hour later, her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She didn't have to answer to know who it was. "Was it you?" Julian's voice carried no accusation, only disbelief, which somehow hurt more. "All that talk about listening, about things worth saving, and you couldn't just tell me?" "Julian, I didn't mean for it to be. For everyone to know." His voice sharpened. "I'm not a charity case, Jenna." Her silence stretched. She could hear Emily's voice faintly in the background, asking if everything was okay. "I was trying to help," she said softly. "You deserve more than struggling with leaking roofs and failing circuits. You deserve peace." "I deserve honesty," he said, the words quiet, cutting. "You had to make it look like you saved me." Again. "Julian, no." The line clicked dead before she could finish. That evening, she drove to the shop. The door was locked. Through the window, she saw him packing tools into crates, methodical, avoiding her reflection. Emily's backpack hung by the wall, untouched. She waited outside until the lights went out. The red Mercedes gleamed faintly in the rain, but inside it, Jenna felt stripped of every comfort. The help that was meant as love had become humiliation. For years, she'd believed generosity could fix the things she couldn't name. Now she understood. Some wounds don't want rescue. They want to be seen. When she finally drove away, her headlights cut across the empty lot, and for the first time since meeting him again, she couldn't tell whether the rain on the windshield came from outside or from her own eyes. 2 days passed before she saw them again. The silence between her and Julian hung heavier than rain clouds. yet she couldn't stay away. The diner lights shimmered across wet pavement when she parked outside, but she didn't go in. Through the window, she saw him wiping down tables, face drawn, movements deliberate. Emily sat in the corner booth coloring, shoulders slightly hunched, as though she understood more than anyone had told her. When Jenna finally stepped inside, the bell above the door rang softly. Julian looked up but didn't speak. His silence was worse than anger. It was restraint, the kind that hides disappointment too deep for words. "I shouldn't have gone behind your back," she said quietly. It wasn't about pity. It was guilt, maybe. I wanted to give something back, but I didn't think how it would look. He leaned on the counter, eyes tired. "You didn't have to give me anything, Jenna. You already did once, years ago. I just didn't realize it until you walked back into my life." Before she could answer, a small hand tugged at her sleeve. Emily stood beside her, holding a folded piece of paper, edges damp from being clutched too tight. "I made this," she said, voice small but sure. Jenna unfolded it. A paper heart colored in bright crayon red, with the shaky words, "For Dad and Miss Jenna," fixed together. Julian exhaled, a sound between a laugh and a sigh. "She's been working on that since last night," he said softly. Emily looked up at both of them. "You said people fix cars, but I think hearts just need glue." For a moment, time stopped. The air smelled faintly of sugar and coffee, and outside, the rain began again, gentle, forgiving. Julian stepped closer, his expression softening. "Guess I owe you an apology too," he said, "for assuming the worst." She shook her head. "We both did." He reached out, hesitated, then brushed her hand with his. The touch was light, but it carried every word they hadn't said: regret, understanding, a promise of something new. Emily grinned, clapping her hands once. Julian laughed quietly. "Seems my daughter's better at repairs than I am." Jenna smiled, eyes damp but steady. "She's got the right teacher." Outside, the storm lifted. When they stepped out together, the puddles reflected the diner's neon glow, and Jenna felt, for the first time, that the world had finally slowed enough for her to catch up to the life waiting in front of her. By late summer, the town had changed its rhythm. The old Ward's auto service sign was gone, replaced by a new one that Red Cross and Company repairs, painted in Emily's handwriting, bold and uneven, the O in company shaped like a tiny heart. The shop's walls gleamed with fresh paint. The scent of new lumber mingled with oil and metal. It wasn't flashy, but it felt alive, like something rebuilt, not replaced. Jenna stood by the open bay door, watching Julian finish tuning an engine. The sun caught the edge of his profile, the grease on his hands, the faint scar on his wrist, details she now knew by heart. Emily darted between them, holding a clipboard, pretending to be the manager. "Dad says I get half if I do all the math," she announced proudly. Julian wiped his brow and smiled at her. "You'll end up running the place, kiddo." "Only if Miss Jenna helps," Emily said. "She's good with people." Jenna laughed. "That's generous. I mostly just drink your dad's bad coffee and hand him the wrong wrench." Julian chuckled. "You're getting better." He leaned against the workbench, eyes softening. "Besides, I don't mind the company." They had fallen into an easy rhythm, shared lunches under the shop awning, quiet evenings fixing small things that didn't need fixing, drives in the red Mercedes when the air cooled and the fields glowed gold. Sometimes, without words, Julian would rest his hand over hers while she shifted gears, and in that small gesture, everything they'd lost and found seemed to balance perfectly. The diner owner stopped by once to drop off pies. "Never seen that place busier," she said. "Good to see you two fixing more than cars." Jenna smiled, cheeks warm. "We had a good mechanic." Julian looked at her, a spark of humor in his eyes. "Took two of us," he said. As dusk settled, Emily climbed into the front seat of the S-Class, humming to herself while Julian closed up the shop. Jenna leaned on the car door, watching the neon from the diner flicker faintly in the distance. "You know," she said, "if my car hadn't broken down that night, I'd have kept driving." Julian turned the key in the lock, the shop light dimming behind him. "Maybe it didn't break down," he said quietly. "Maybe it stopped exactly where it needed to." She smiled, the kind of smile that belonged entirely to the present. When he reached her side, she slipped her hand into his. No hesitation left between them. Emily leaned out the window. "Come on, Mom, we're gonna miss dinner." Jenna froze for a heartbeat, not from surprise, but from the simple, perfect rightness of the word. Julian's arm brushed hers as they walked toward the car. The Mercedes purred to life, steady and strong. As it rolled down the road toward the diner's distant glow, Jenna looked through the windshield at the clean horizon and thought, for the first time in years, that nothing about her life felt stalled anymore. The engine hummed, the night breathed easy, and in that sound, soft, certain, she heard the rhythm of everything finally fixed.